Shalom and welcome to Jerusalem Studio. When the ancient Greek poet Homer wrote about the wine dark sea thousands of years ago, he referred to the same part of the eastern Mediterranean, which throughout history has been a naval battleground. Yet today, history and geography converge once again, with Turkey and one of its arch rivals, Greece, clashing over gas reserves hidden underneath, and with regional powers such as Israel and Egypt siding with Athens against Ankara. To explore the latest tensions surrounding the volatile waters, we're joined from Central Israel by Dr. Haygitan Kwanyanochak, who is a research fellow at the Moshe Dayan Center as well as at the JISS in Jerusalem. Shalom.
Thank you very much.
Also joining our panel from another location here in Jerusalem is Professor Ephraim Inbar, who is the president of the Jerusalem Institute for Strategy and Security. Welcome.
Shalom to everybody.
And I'd like also to welcome to today's panel our TV7 analyst, Mr. Amir Oren. Mr. Oren, give us a better understanding at this rivalry, which is long before just several months ago, and is really interconnected with all of the powers in the region, has made the situation here quite complicated to understand for many of our viewers.
So the fact that there is tension between Turkey and Greece is no surprise. And indeed, this was one of the reasons for the formation of the North Atlantic Treaty Organization, NATO, because the whole concept that the United States came up with was to get old rivals such as France and Germany, or Greece and Turkey, under the American umbrella, because there was a common adversary, and that is the Soviet Union during the Cold War. But of course, the old rivalries and hatreds never really went away, and in the 70s, when the colonel's junta ruled Greece and the Turks invaded Cyprus, it came into the surface and has not been resolved up to now. What has changed recently is the finding that this particular part of the Eastern Mediterranean is resource rich, especially in gas reserves, and there are disputes regarding the sovereignty of particular parts of the Mediterranean, because there are so many islands there. You can have territorial waters in dispute because the mainland and part of an island could clash. What has happened in recent weeks is that the Turks have sent a survey ship into a disputed area quite close to a Greek island. And the survey ship is escorted by naval units. And Egypt has already come up with support for the Greek position. Israel obviously has been training with the Greek armed forces in recent years, ever since Turkey, which used to be Israel's ally, turned around and became its adversary. So right now, we are on the verge of a possible armed clash between Greece and Turkey, with other powers perhaps joining the fray. The US Sixth Fleet, which is a NATO force standing by, and the European Union, in which Turkey is not a member, only Greece is trying to mediate between the rivals.
Indeed. I would like to refer the next question to Professor Inbar. To what degree is the situation volatile, considering that there is so much at stake with two economies which are quite substantial on the one hand, but also at a very low point on the other, needing that vital boost to replenish their coffers? Are we going towards a head-to-head confrontation, as Mr. Oren has just stated, or is it more of a diplomatic discourse that we may see in the next several weeks?
I think the situation is very volatile because basically we see a new Turkey. It's not the Turkey of the Cold War. It is a Turkey now that has Ottoman and Islamist ambitions. It is led by an Islamist version of the Muslim Brotherhood, Erdogan, and it has developed a lot of appetite. It's not only in the Mediterranean that it challenges the status quo, it denies the existence of the Lausanne Treaty that delineated the borders between Greece and Turkey. It is has military presence in Syria, in Iraq. It has a military presence in Qatar. It is a Turkey that is much more aggressive, ready to use force in the region. And the issue is not only energy, it's much more than that.
Indeed. Dr. Koynyan-Olacak, to what degree do you see this in the same light? And are we seeing a Turkey that is seeking to expand its boundaries beyond the treaties that were signed following the First World War and established a new Turkey after the Ottoman Empire that has ruled the region for so many years?
Well, from my perspective, what we are witnessing today in the Eastern Mediterranean, from my perspective, it's really similar to what was happened in 1996 when the two countries, when Greece and Turkey almost declared against each other war when they adopted a similar brinkmanship policy next to the Imya or Kardak Islands. Today, given the fact that both of the countries are suffering from negative ramifications of the coronavirus crisis, I sincerely don't think that both of the countries are really interested in declaring a war against each other, despite all of these propaganda in both of the countries. What I understand is, at least as a Turkey expert, I can tell for Turkey, Mr. Erdogan is taking the advantage of this historical rivalry in order to divert the attention of the problems at home. If I would like to make it more clear. Nowadays, the Turkish lira's devaluation is a very well-known fact in all markets. The Turkish citizens are becoming poorer on daily basis. Their ability to travel or their ability to buy imported goods are becoming almost impossible. So the unemployment also is rising in Turkey. And given all these facts, so Mr. Erdogan is using this historical ancient card that is the rivalry with Greece. He only recently converted the Orthodox Church, the Hagia Sophia, the cathedral of the Orthodox Christians, into a mosque. And now we are seeing brinkmanship in the Eastern Mediterranean. And let us also not forget, Turkey is also escalating the situation in the eastern border with Armenia because of the latest friction between Armenia and Azerbaijan. And regarding your question, whether Turkey would like to expand its borders, on paper, of course not. But
of course not?
What we are, because on paper they are not going to declare
officially,
that they would like to officially. Yeah, definitely. Thank you very much for correcting me. But on paper not. But we are seeing that, as Professor Imbar already mentioned, the Turkish army is already is an occupying force in Iraq, in northern Syria, in Cyprus, in Libya. They have military presence in Somalia, Qatar. They are willing to inaugurate another army bases in Oman and in Sudan. So I can tell that the Turkish administration is very ambitious. Maybe they are not going to annex all of these territories to the borders of the Turkish Republic, but we can understand that this current understanding of Turkish foreign policy is a very huge, it's a drastic change when we are comparing with the traditional Turkish foreign policy, which refrained any contact with the Middle East.
Indeed. Mr. Oren, two questions for you, short ones. The first one was the conversion of the museum, so-called Hagia Sophia, which was initially established as a beautiful cathedral for the Constantinople era and the eastern part of the Roman Empire, which the latter empire, of course, was that a signal by Turkey to convert it from a museum into a mosque? A signal also to the international community and primarily to the Christian West, so to speak. And the second part, what is the Turkish narrative on this? Where are they standing at this stage? I had the opportunity to speak with some Turkish officials, but I'd like to understand how do you see this currently?
So you mentioned Constantine, who was later commemorated by the name Constantinople, which only later turned into Istanbul. And as we all know, it took 300 years approximately from the death of Christ until the religion started in earnest in what is now Turkey. And what Erdogan is trying to do is make the Ottoman Empire great again. Only this time around, he doesn't have weak entities around him the way it was in the 16th century, because again, we all remember that for 400 years, from 1517 to 1917, he ruled the very place from where we are broadcasting now. But this is all gone.
Nevertheless, we couldn't necessarily call neither the Byzantine Empire nor the Mamluk Empire at 517 at the time weak. Compared to today, it's pretty much equal.
The weak entities were around these empires until they fell. But of course, historians will tell you that this is a very tenuous relationship. But to be honest, we too are sitting in the city of David. We claim our heritage from the ancient Hebrews and Canaanites and what have you. So for Erdogan, who is a master politician, knows how to manipulate his audience, as Chai earlier mentioned. He uses it for domestic purposes. Of course, this is used to divert attention from real problems, and when the population is filled with nationalistic and religious fervor, they tend to forget for a moment that their bellies are empty.
Indeed. Professor Inbal, it seems, though, when I had the opportunity to speak with Turkish officials, that they're very convicted about their rights. In their school of thought, they see a lot of the areas taken from them after the fall of the Ottoman Empire as illegitimate, as forced upon them, something that they expect to be returned to them, or at least to receive the rights on certain natural gas and other natural resources, which they claim should be theirs, regardless of claims of others, which are relevant to the law of the sea and international law as we know it.
Well, first of all, I think that we should treat seriously the attempts by contemporary Turkey to lead again the Muslim world. And they use their enmity toward Israel, for example, in order to gain votes and sympathy in the Muslim world. We all know their activities in Jerusalem. And they said openly that they intend that their next target after Hagia Sophia to be to liberate Jerusalem from Zionist rule, which evokes certain feelings among Muslims. So this is part of their self-perception and their aggressive foreign policy. In terms of international law, I think that we see indeed a clash of interpretation of the law over the seas. We've seen separate agreements. First of all, the Libyan-Turkish agreement about delineating the economic exclusive zone in the Mediterranean, which actually ignored the rights of Greece. At the same time, we've seen also Egyptian Greek agreement that to some extent overlooks Turkish rights as they see it. The issue is whether islands have a right to an economic zone. Most of the islands in the Aegean are, of course, Greek, and the Turks do not take lightly this fact, and they also want to increase their own rights around Cyprus, which is, it was mentioned before, partly occupied by Turkey since 1974. So we see, on one hand, symbolic clashes as well as economic clashes over the riches that are within the exclusive zones of each country. I must say that the Turkish Libyan agreement affects Israel, of course, as well as Egypt, because if we really want to build a pipeline from the East Mediterranean to transfer gas to Europe that needs energy, the Libyan Turkish map actually obstructs the free movement of this energy and give the Turks as well as the Libyans, Tripoli government, a right to interfere. And this is precisely why Egypt and Greece are together against Turkish growing influence. This struggle also involves Qatar. Qatar, that is supports Muslim Brotherhood, is helping Turkey. Actually, it supports Turkey economically in order to be able to project power in the East Mediterranean and in the Middle East.
Indeed. Dr. Konya Naochak, I'd like to focus once more on the agreements that Professor Inbal was speaking about. Two significant agreements and one smaller potential agreement that may cause more havoc and bring Israel deeper into the picture. The first one, of course, as Professor Inbal stated, was about the agreement between Libya and Turkey, an exclusive economic zone agreement to try and locate natural resources, disregarding the island of Crete pretty much and Greek rights to the laws of the sea there in their international waters. But at the same time, Greece countered that when Nikos Dendias, the foreign minister of Athens, and Samih Shoukry, the foreign minister of Cairo, sat together in Egypt and concluded an EEZ, an exclusive economic zone of their own, completely disregarding the Turkish perspective after Turkey itself had extensive negotiations with the Germans about trying and alleviate tensions between Greece and Egypt. Now, a third point was specifically for Lebanon. Turkey is now entering into discussion, into dialogue with the caretaker of the government, as there is no government right now in Beirut, about building the port and potentially also expanding its capacity to start and establishing a certain EEZ agreement between Beirut and Ankara, which would ultimately trigger the dispute which currently persists between Israel and Lebanon. How is all of this connected? Is now Turkey trying to expand and capitalize on the different situations and current affairs or disasters that occur in the region, including, of course, the clashes in Libya between the East and the West, the horrendous explosion that occurred on the port of Beirut, and, of course, the instability that is caused because of the economic ramifications of the corona contagion?
Well, as you said, everything is interconnected to everything. For instance, you forgot to mention about the latest deal between the United Arab Emirates and Israel. And from the Turkish point of view, the Turks are also seeing this particular normalization as a part of all of this picture. Of course, we cannot also separate this UAE and Israeli normalization from this big picture. As we may all remember, approximately, if I'm not mistaken, like 2 months ago, France, United Arab Emirates, Haftar, and Egypt they all, and also Republic of Cyprus and Greece, they made a very crucial declaration, and they warned Turkey for its own aggression. So in this full big picture, Turkey is feeling challenged, that all of these countries are challenging the Turkish foreign policy. And you also mentioned about Beirut. Especially in Lebanon, I can tell you that the Turks began to engage in an open war with the French. The Turkish president openly accused Macron for trying to recolonize Lebanon, and instead of France, Turks are trying to provide aid, economic aid, and humanitarian aid to Lebanon. So it's a very big picture. It's a very complex chess game, and from my perspective, everything is very much connected to everything, and both of the sides are trying to delegitimize the latest steps of the other. For instance, when Egypt and Greece are making this new EEZ agreement, so they are delegitimizing the Libyan-Turkish EEZ agreement, and as a result, we are seeing that the Turks are changing their policy, and they are adopting again a very aggressive brinkmanship policy by sending the Oruç seismic ship and the Turkish frigates to the place next to the Castellorizo island of Greece, and they declared a navtex, which means that the Turkish fleet declared a certain area as a closed military area, and of course that particular area is claimed by Greece as an area of exclusive economic zone. So that's why we happen to see that also the Greek air forces and the Greek navy began to involve in this friction. And from my perspective, it's very ironic, but due to Turkey's very aggressive and neo-Ottomanist foreign policy, Turkey is the core architect of this alliance against itself. Let us not forget, before the deterioration of the relations between Israel and Turkey, we could not have spoken about this kind of an alliance between Israel, Cyprus, and Greece. Of course, let us not also forget Egypt in this issue. And of course, the rivalry between United Arab Emirates and Turkey. Turkey is holding United Arab Emirates responsible as one of the responsibles, for the failed coup attempt. They think that the Palestinian Mohammed Dahlan is one of the most important financiers of the coup perpetrators. So we cannot really speak about a normalized relationship between all of these countries. So from my perspective, the biggest biggest winner in all of this game, from my perspective, is Greece and Cyprus, because of this aggressive policy of Turkey, they basically found real good friends, new friends.
Indeed, and we see, of course, the French entering this arena a lot stronger with force. We hear also President Emmanuel Macron
Also to Cyprus.
speaking. Indeed, we're hearing President Emmanuel Macron calling for the European nations to unite in confronting Turkey. Just this week, we saw Mike Pompeo, U.S. Secretary of State, standing alongside his Austrian counterpart, who came out and said that unless Turkey shifts its activities, it will be confronted not only diplomatically but also militarily, something that was unheard of just several years ago, let alone several months ago. To what degree can we see, we don't have very much time for this, but Mr. Oren, to what degree do we see France entering even deeper into this, Saudi Arabia slowly backtracking from Lebanon, so it seems, since Hariri came out of the office, and Turkey taking its place as the so-called guardians of the Sunni Muslims in Lebanon? is Israel expected to also take a role in this whole situation?
Well, Turkey bears a grudge towards France going back to when Sarkozy was in power, because the Turks blame mostly the French, of course, also the Germans and others, for blocking Turkey's entry into the EU for fear that the French weight in the councils of Europe will be lessened by an equivalent number of Turks. So yes, there is some Turkish-French tension. However, we are 2.5 months before the elections in the United States. Rationally, one would suppose that the tension there in the Mediterranean could wait, but we remember that sometimes on the eve of elections, it is the time for escalation when one least expects it.
And the Israeli angle to things, and even more so, the American angle to things, regardless of who is sitting in the Oval Office, they still own a big portion, not a majority shareholder, but a big portion of all of Israel's offshore gas and energy reservoirs, which ultimately constitutes within the national security interests of the United States, which triggers also the capacity of the United States to exercise military force. Will this dissuade the Turks from using it in order to attack Israel?
Well, the Turks have Incirlik, they can cancel NATO operations from there, and they have a human bomb, the hundreds of thousands, perhaps millions of migrants, which they can unleash on Europe. So all heads would be cooler, probably.
Well, unfortunately, this is all the time that we have for today, so I'd like to thank each and every one of you, Dr. Konya Narochak, Professor Invar, and Mr. Oren for being with us here today. And I'd like to thank our viewers as well, and we will see you next time.